It's time for a Mailbag Friday. So, what are the listeners thinking? We'll find out next on Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are tuned into another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. You also can catch us on wherever you get your podcasts. That's Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast, Odyssey, and YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. If you are that first-time listener and you want to know a little bit more about me and this show, well, I am based here in Kansas City. I work over at Sports Radio 810 WHB, doing some hosting, co-hosting, and some producing. If you are a regular listener, you've probably heard this spiel hundreds of times before, but this is just for the new listeners, as you know. So you can catch me over there Monday through Friday, but you can also catch me here Monday through Friday, but it's just going to be 30-minute episodes of the Kansas City Royals here on the Locked On Royals channel, which at Locked On Podcast Network, it is your team every day. Now, today's show is brought to you by SupplyHouse. And at SupplyHouse, it is the reliable way to get parts fast. Shop your next plumbing, HVAC, or electrical job and get fast shipping from coast to coast at supplyhouse.com. Well, this is going to be a first here on a Mailbag Friday. I do apologize to those questions that don't get into today's episode. We have nearly 40 questions to go over in a very limited time. So that's putting me very much under what I would like to be at, which is about a minute per question. I'm going to have to be running through these rather quickly. So if you didn't hear your question in this, I didn't give you an answer, just shoot them back over to me on Twitter. I'll try to answer them or direct message me, or you can simply just reach back out to YouTube. So I'm going to try my best to get as many as I can in there. But if you don't hear your question, I do want to be able to answer it for you. So just send it back over to me once this episode goes out there, whenever I do have a chance to post this video before the game tonight. So let's go to question number one. It comes from Matt. If it were up to you, how many more big moves would the Royals make before the deadline? I would imagine that the Royals are going to make 2 more moves before the deadline. With the talk of them being so aggressive and going after a bat and going after a bullpen arm, that's exactly what I think they're going to acquire before the deadline on Tuesday. So in my opinion, I think the Royals have a move or 2 still left, and I would lean closer to 2 because I think they're going to add 1 bat, 1 to hit leadoff, I might add, and then also a high leverage arm that can give them some length in the bullpen. But good question there from Matt. And Matt also asked, what do you think the package would have to be for Michael Kopech? Similar to what Yimi Garcia got today, which was the 10th best prospect in Seattle's system, and then another non-ranked prospect throw in there. Kopech has worse numbers than Yimi Garcia, but also Yimi Garcia was coming off the injured list. So I think maybe around that or just a little bit more, but not anything the Royals could not afford. So we'll see if Michael Kopech is one of those arms the Royals are going to be going after. Michael asked, I think we need a leadoff hitter. Who could we get by Wednesday? Also, does Prado or any of our minor league outfielders have trade value? I'm going to say nobody in Omaha has that much of trade value, at least to get back a good return for the major league level. You could always flip a minor leaguer for a minor leaguer, but no, I don't believe there's any tremendous value guys down in Omaha right now. But as for the leadoff hitter, I think there are about 4 options. I'm going to say Tommy Pham. I'm going to say Jazz Chisholm. I'm going to say Jesse Winkert, though he's hitting the 3-hole for Washington the majority of this year, and then Luis Rengifo of the Angels. Those, to me, are kind of the 4 guys. As long as I didn't double down on anybody there, I think those are 4 different guys. But that's who I think they would be targeting for a leadoff bat, unless they have somebody in mind that we aren't even discussing. But those seem to be the 4 that they've been really talking up a lot and where there seems to be a lot of smoke around. Next question comes from Maiden. Michael Kopech or Carlos Estevez, and Brent Rooker or Jazz Chisholm. If you had to pick 1 bat and 1 reliever, which it looks like the Royals are trying to do, that would be a very expensive haul. But if I had to pick there, the Jazz Chisholm or Brent Rooker is tough. Brent Rooker still got years of control, but he's also 30 years old. So how good is Brent Rooker going to be the next 2 years? I still think I would side on the Brent Rooker deal because of how great he's been this year. And if you're looking for an immediate impact bat, I think he would give you that over Jazz Chisholm. But Jazz is also younger and has more flexibility defensively. But I think as a bat, I would go after Brent Rooker if you were just posing me with Rooker or Jazz Chisholm. As for the relievers, I'm saying Carlos Estevez over Michael Kopech. Carlos Estevez throws hard, not as hard as Kopech, but doesn't walk many guys, has a very low whip, has been great for the Angels this year. He doesn't have the best numbers always in high leverage spots, but I think he gives the Royals that extra power in the back end of the bullpen that they've been looking for. This one comes from Justin. Where would 2014 Billy Butler hit in this year's lineup? I like it. A little bit outside the box here. I think Billy would hit third in this lineup. Now, it would depend. I think you could rearrange the top of the order there. If you wanted to lead off Vinny to get a high on base guy, you could lead him off there and then go Bobby 2 and Billy 3. If Billy didn't hit 3 and you wanted to leave it where it was, well, I think Billy would hit 5th right behind Salvador Perez, though that would give you 2 very slow runners, actually 3 slow runners in Vinny, Salvi, and Billy if they all were on the bases at the same time. But I think he'd hit 3rd or 5th if he was on this 2024 squad. Esky8515 asks, how do you feel about the Royals acquiring James Paxton? Well, unfortunately, though, this is more so on me of when I did this episode. James Paxton was already acquired by the Red Sox. Not your fault, Esky8515. That's more so me of when I decided to record this podcast. I wouldn't have hated it because I think the Royals need that 6th starter, and maybe they still are looking for a 6th starter out there. Charles asked, what's the best course of action for the leadoff spot? If you're going to stay internally, I feel like you're going to have to get more creative than Adam Frazier, Garrett Hampson, and Michael Garcia. Maybe they are waiting for Garcia to heat up to put back up there. But I also I think the Royals are going to be trying to acquire their leadoff bat because there's really no great internal option. I don't want to lead off Bobby Witt Jr. I don't want to lead off Vinny. Freddie Fermin, I've heard a lot about. He actually has great numbers when leading off an inning, but I don't think he plays every single day. He doesn't play enough to have that leadoff spot, and I know the response would be, well, play him every single day, though I just don't think the Royals view him in that same light. So I do think the Royals are going to go externally to get that bat, and again, I would put it at Tommy Pham, Jazz Chisholm, or Luis Rengifo as some true leadoff guys the Royals could be targeting. Mike Talkman, a cheap leadoff hitter. He's another guy. This one's from Bobbert Witt. That's a really good point. We'll see Mike Talkman in Chicago or against Chicago coming up in this 3-game series. I would not hate an addition of Mike Talkman. And, I wonder if JJ Picollo has had him on the radar for a while. He's a high OBP guy, not the quickest, but still, I think Mike Talkman is a bat-first outfielder. And I think he'd be cheaper. And we know the Cubs are selling going into this series. So Talkman's another guy I'll throw in there. So good point out there. I was actually thinking about throwing his name in there and completely forgot. But yeah, Mike Talkman is a good bat to look at. The numbers don't pop unbelievably, but look at the on-base percentage. If you're just going for a leadoff guy, I think he's somebody that would be cheap and affordable. Those are kind of the same things, of course, for the Kansas City Royals. But we'll see this coming series. I think he is still healthy to my knowledge. I know he'd been bouncing around on the injured list this year. At least I thought he was, unless I'm mixing him up with somebody. Yeah, Talkman's DHing tonight for the Chicago Cubs. Only a 701 OPS this year, hitting 246, and he has struggled over the last 30 games or so. But over the season, he's got an on-base percentage of 343. If you wanted a really cheap bat, I think that would be an affordable target to go after from the Chicago Cubs. Next one comes from Don. What can the Royals learn from Ryan O'Hearn's success since he left the team? I never get too upset about Ryan O'Hearn figuring it out in Baltimore because the Royals gave him opportunities. And yeah, a different coaching staff could have seen this success, but also in baseball, sometimes guys just need a fresh start. They need to go to a new team, not have high expectations, not feel the pressure of the fan base, and be able to thrive. And that's exactly what Ryan O'Hearn did. Brent Rooker, I would be more upset about because the Royals gave him 14 games. Like they never saw something like this happening and just moved on from him. Ryan O'Hearn had multiple opportunities from 2000 and the end of 2019 or 18 all the way up into 2022. Like there were plenty of times for Ryan O'Hearn to click here and it didn't. And the Orioles found something, as happens a lot in baseball, and they were able to tap into that potential. I think it's great for him, but they can learn to maybe try out some of the methods of how Ryan O'Hearn improved his skill, which was launching the ball more than he was in Kansas City. This one comes from Tone. Timeline on Jack Caglione. I've always said they don't need to rush him, but if he goes and tears it up in high and AA and AAA, I could see a Wyatt Langford approach where Wyatt Langford did not spend long at the minor league level. By the time he was drafted, I think that same year he was drafted, he ended up in AAA at the end of the year and then broke camp with the Rangers this year. A World Series winning team, I might add. So if Jack Caglione early on next year just tears his way through high A and AA and AAA, I would see no reason why he couldn't be up in the second half of the season, and you kind of treat him as a trade deadline acquisition. But if it's not showing that he is tearing it up, he's just hitting well, I would take my time with him and just try to get him up there at the beginning of 2026. Okay, we're going to take our first break of the show. When we come back, plenty more questions to get into on this Mailbag Friday. That's coming up on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. You can always find us on wherever you get your podcasts. That is Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast, Odyssey, and YouTube. We got a few sponsors to give a shout out to, starting with Booking.com. Booking.yeah. With summer travel heating up, especially for baseball games, it's time to explore those U.S. cities you've always secretly wanted to learn more about. Yes, we are talking about your rival cities, and for Royals fans, that would, of course, be Chicago, Cleveland, Minnesota, those AL Central foes, Detroit. I've actually been there before, and a lot better than I think some people would expect. And with hotels and bed and breakfasts, vacation rentals, resorts, and so much more on Booking.com, you might just find your perfect stay even in your rival cities. And speaking of going to Detroit, going to Cleveland, if you're thinking about following the Royals in this second half push, well, why not go and book your hotel at Booking.com so you can find that hotel that's so close to the stadium and you can have a great time when watching your Royals on the road. From hotels that look over stadiums to family-friendly resorts, Booking.com has so many choices across the U.S. for your summer travel this season. The right stay can make you a fan of any city, even your rivals. Book today on Booking.com, on the site, or the Booking.com app. Also want to tell you about FanDuel, and we know that postseason in baseball is now just about 2 months away, a little bit over that, but there is no better time to get in on the action. If you want to start feeling like you're on a hot streak rolling into the playoffs, you know college football and the NFL is right around the corner. Head over to FanDuel and start placing some minor bets just to get the confidence going, because FanDuel has some great offers for you. And this summer, they are hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. And if you're wanting to put some money down on tonight's Royals game, well, why not roll with Bobby Witt Jr.? He seems to get on base 3 times a night, so maybe put a little bit of money down on Bobby Witt Jr. having over 1.5 hits against the Chicago Cubs and Kyle Hendricks. Okay, let's jump back into some more questions here on Twitter. Again, if I don't get to your question, just send it back over to me, and I'll try my best to answer it in a timely manner, because that's not fair to you guys, just because we have a ton of questions here in the mailbag. I think we had 36 in total sent over to me. This one comes from Matt. Which player do you think loses their 26/40-man roster when the Royals make some trades for a leadoff bat and potentially another reliever? What I'd prefer is Frazier on the bat side and Cruz on the pitching side. If they were to acquire 2 major league guys, so we would know that that would mean somebody on the bench loses their spot and then somebody in the bullpen. I imagine if they go out there and get a leadoff hitter, Nick Lofton's going to be the odd man out. MJ Melendez is going to be coming back soon. He'll be taking Drew Waters' spot. So there's two spots right there taken care of. I do, unfortunately, think Nick Lofton's going to be the odd man out, and they'd rather stick with Frazier and Hampson. And then for the bullpen arms, it depends if they get a left-hander or a right-hander. If it is a right-hander, I would imagine Chris Stratton is going to be the odd man out there. I think he's very comparable to Nick Anderson. So if they were to get a Carlos Estevez, a Michael Kopech, a Lucas Ursig, somebody along the lines of that, I think Chris Stratton will be the odd man out. And then if it was a left-handed pitcher, I think you are looking at, I don't want to say Will Smith, because Will Smith has a very big presence on this team. I think a lot of the guys look up to him. They love his experience. Seems to be a bit of a glue guy. It's not going to, of course, be James MacArthur, despite some people's anger towards him. It certainly is not going to be him. It's tough to think on who it might be. Just off the top of my head, I'm struggling to think of a left-hander other than Will Smith to lose his spot there. It's not going to be Sam Long. It's not going to be Chris Bubich, as we know, just because those guys have been so reliable for the Royals in their limited roles so far this season. But Looking now at their roster, trying to find somebody else other than Will Smith, I really can't. I think that maybe if they don't want to just get a lefty for a lefty, I think Chris Stratton is going to be the guy, whether it is a righty or a lefty. So that's my take there on who they'd have to subtract. Waka Season asks, when do you believe Jack Caglione arrives in Kansas City? I was thinking late 2025. Yeah, that's kind of what we just teased is if he tears it up in the minor league level, you could have the Wyatt Langford approach, who, by the way, was his teammate at Florida in college. So I don't think it's impossible anymore. We have seen guys get drafted, especially college guys, and move rather quickly through the minor league level. So it would not surprise me whatsoever if Jack Caglione was in Kansas City for the second half of 2025. Baguette asked how acquirable is a guy like Ben Joyce of the Angels. I don't think the Angels are going to move off of him. He's also just battled injuries in his career, and I'm not sure how sustainable it is. I'm sure there is a possibility of getting him, but with the years of control, how hard he throws, imagine what, AJ Puck got from the Diamondbacks. The Diamondbacks had to give up some big-time prospects for AJ Puck, and AJ Puck's had not that great of a year. At least they tried him as a starter in Miami, had to move him back to the bullpen. He's been much better since then, but that's what I kind of compare him as a guy that throws really hard and has years of control. So I'd put it, around 20%, maybe 15% of being acquired by any team out there at the deadline. JC Retro Athletics asks, any guys in the big league roster in danger of being traded away? I don't think so, unless it was to clear a roster spot. If they were to acquire a bullpen arm and a bat, and they wanted to trade Nick Lofton to get some more value or some depth for a sixth starter, or a guy down in Omaha, trading a blocked guy for a blocked guy at the major league level, I could see it. But they're not going to be trading, Adam Frazier, Garrett Hampson, Freddie Fermin, Dairon Blanco. I think they're only going to add to the major league roster. Next question comes from Moyer. What's going to be the most important week stretch of games here in the second half? Well, there is that month-long stretch, in my opinion, that they're going to have to eyeball, which is why these next 10 games are vitally important. So you could say these next 10 games are crucial to Kansas City. And if they can't capitalize on that, it's going to be really hard to make a push in August. But I think it starts on August 5th to me, and it will end on September 11th. So about a month's worth, a little bit over a month. They got Boston at home for 3, St. Louis for 2, Minnesota on the road for 3, Cincinnati on the road for 3, the Angels at home for 3, Philly at home for 3, Cleveland on the road for 4, Houston on the road for 4, Cleveland at home for 3, Minnesota at home for 3, and then New York on the road for 3 there. So to me, actually, I think I'd put it August 26th to September 8th. I know it's about 2 weeks there, but that is Cleveland 7 times, Minnesota 3, and Houston 4. That may be what dictates the Royals' playoff spot or non-playoff spot when it comes down to it. This one comes from JHB. Will they go after another reliever, and who is on the radar? I do believe they go after another reliever. They are in on Tanner Scott. They are in on Carlos Estevez. That's been the talk now for a couple of days now, especially from the big-time reporters and Jeff Passan and Ken Rosenthal. I would love for them to take a look at Mark Leiter Jr. for the Chicago Cubs. I think he is a nasty reliever, years of control, 33 years old, but would be one of your more trustworthy guys in the back end of the bullpen. So to me, man, if you could package like a Mark Leiter Jr. and Mike Tauchman deal, take care of business this weekend, and then kick your feet up when it comes to the deadline on Tuesday or Wednesday or whenever it is, July 30th. So let's get to that point on the calendar here. July 30th will be on Tuesday. So yeah, I was right the first time around. I've been mixed up on Wednesday and Tuesday, but believe it is on Tuesday at 4 or 5 o'clock. I'll have a much better timeline on Monday's episode, but that's who I think they'll be looking at in terms of the reliever market. Lucas Erceg, Austin Adams. You've heard me say their names quite a bit. And I'm also curious if they're thinking of anybody else that nobody's talking about out there. So we'll see here in the next few days. Dynasty Lethal Protector asks, can a team do something to get the hot stove going? I'm getting restless. I see this question came about 24 hours ago. It's very hot now. Everybody seems to be making trades. The Mariners are very aggressive. Baltimore's being aggressive. Arizona's being aggressive. That's just the tip of the iceberg, man. It's going to be a wild weekend and a wild Monday and a very wild Tuesday. This should be a very fun trade deadline in 2024. Micah asks how much longer you think the Royals keep MacArthur at closer. I'm curious tonight if there is a save situation if they go to MacArthur or if they go matchup-based. I'd probably argue it's matchup-based because I do think MacArthur needs a different role on this team. I think being a 6th inning guy, 7th inning guy, 8th inning guy, just to get you 3 outs in a different leverage spot will help him a long term. And if he gets hot, you can try him and get the closer's role. But I think somebody else will get a closing opportunity if they have game 1, game 2, or game 3 against the Chicago Cubs. John asked, do you think we would ever see Isbell in the leadoff spot if we don't acquire anyone via trade? I don't think so. I think Kyle Isbell is really experiencing sustained success for the first time in his career, and I don't think you want to ruin that by putting him up in a spotlight spot at the top of the order. I think he's doing fine in the 9-hole. You keep him there, and you let him stay hot and provide that production in the second leadoff spot, as some people like to call it. Okay, before we move on to our final set of questions, want to give a shout out to Locked On Sports Today. It's here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now, available on the free Fire TV channels app. When we return, we'll wrap up our final episode of the week next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. You can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Our last sponsor is our title sponsor in SupplyHouse.com. Get supplies from the site that's made for the skilled trades. Yes, that's SupplyHouse.com. SupplyHouse.com is the reliable way to order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical products online, and their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Shop a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from over 400 top brands and get your order delivered right to your door with fast shipping from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Get expert support and industry-leading service from the friendliest folks in the business and talk to a real person every time. Pros in the skilled trades can get a competitive edge by joining SupplyHouse.com's free Trade Master program. Every Trade Master gets access to a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Join thousands of trade pros already benefiting from their free membership at SupplyHouse.com and order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from anywhere with just a few clicks at SupplyHouse.com. Our last set of questions here are going to be kicked off with Doc. Jack, where and when is our number 1 draft pick going to play? Well, I think Jack Caglione is going to start at first base. If there was a need to move him anywhere else, I think it would be right field. And as we've discussed already, I think it could be late 2025 or early 2026 when Jack Caglione could make it up to Kansas City. Next question comes from Ricardo. Do you expect Dinelson Lamet to contribute to the big league team this season? Who else among Bolin, Cox, Carlos Hernandez, Klein, Lynch, McMillan, and Pennington could join the bullpen as internal options? I do not think Lamet gets up unless it was a doubleheader in which they needed a 27th man, but I think he also has to be added, of course, to the 40-man roster relatively soon because I don't think they have any doubleheaders lined up except for that Cleveland game. I don't think, though, he is there to be a contributor at the big league level. I'm not even sure how long he stays in the organization. Like I said on Twitter before, I wish they would have taken the chance on him a few years back. Now I think it's more so for minor league depth. And as for the guys listed off there, I think Walter Pennington or Will Klein is the only guy you could really count on to make a contribution at the big league level, but nobody immediate, I think, right now. Eli asks, thoughts on Michael Conforto of the Giants? Had some career leadoff production and his expiring contract with the Giants that they could eat a big portion of to save money on giving up big prospects. I haven't thought about Michael Conforto in that spot. I just don't know if he's having a good enough season to be able to count on him to really change this lineup. And just the simple fact that I haven't heard anything on it, or there hasn't been much smoke, I'm not sure the Giants are looking into moving him to Kansas City. Hunter Renfro asks, in fact, that's the Hunter Renfro Twitter account. I don't know if Hunter actually has a Twitter account, but this is kind of funny that his profile picture and Hunter16 Renfro is the Twitter handle there. So I absolutely love that. Can we trade for a closer? I don't think the outfield is a major issue as the closer. I think they're going to try to acquire either a Tanner Scott or a Carlos Estevez, but if not, I do think it's going to be a different guy out there getting the next save opportunity just to give James MacArthur a little bit of a break. Marty asked if the Royals think Walker will opt out. Shouldn't they look into trading him? I actually had this conversation at work a couple days ago. I'm not sure Michael Walker will opt out because he had the injury, and I think he's going to make a good amount of money if he decides to opt back in because it'll be $16 million, I think it is. I don't think Michael Walker would make more than that on the open market. If he was having a Seth Lugo type season, different story. I think the Royals would have to get more creative with that. But I think I would predict at this point Michael Walker is going to be on this team in 2025. Harry's dad asks, why not move Bubic to closer? I think, if anything, it's just experience. He just got back to the big league level. I would love to see him get a shot because I think he's got some of the best stuff in the bullpen, but the Royals may be wanting to slow him into it a little bit rather than just thrust him into that spot in the middle of a wild card race. But I do hope sooner rather than later. Carl asks, what's more important in the Royals' postseason success, adding an outfield bat or adding another relief pitcher? I'm going to say relief pitcher. Bullpen is a big part of winning in October, and if you don't have a bullpen, you can't even make it out of the wild card series, which if the Royals get in, hey, you're just playing with house money at that point. It's not a do or die season, but if you want to put some stress on other teams, having a good bullpen, a stabilized bullpen would go a long way in doing that. Jeff asked, how many games above 500 do the Royals have to be when we enter the tough stretch of schedule from August 23rd to September 11th? During that stretch, 20 games, I think. If we manage to go 9-11 or better, what would you say our playoff chances are? I think that would put them at 7 games over 500. It'd still be around 50 to 55% because I think it's going to be close all the way into September. It's going to be a coin flip. Now, if they go 11-9, you stay 10 games above 500 or over that, I think that chance goes to 65 to 70%. But if you hover around 500, nothing wrong with that for that gauntlet of a schedule. So I wouldn't be too disappointed in an output like that. DJE asks, how long is Bobby Witt Jr. a Royal? Currently on contract what year? Well, it's the first year of a double-digit year contract, so Bobby Witt Jr. is not going anywhere anytime soon. Carl asked, best solution for the bullpen? I think it would be acquiring one more high-leverage guy, a guy that can get the swing and miss like Hunter Harvey. It just makes it easier on handling that bullpen late in tight situations. So that would be my take, is getting one more high-leverage reliever. A good question there, though, from Carl. Jason asked, how many games do you attend at the K per year usually? I would say of the 81, between work and just going as a fan, I would put it into the 25 to 30 range. Sometimes a little bit less than that. This year it's been a little bit more. But yeah, typically that's what I try to do in the 81 home games. You know, you love to shoot to getting about 50% there and watching the other 50 at home, just because there's 81 games on the road you don't usually attend. Although I have had the chance to catch them on the road this year and plan to try to do some moving forward. Just kind of all depends on work schedule. But yeah, I'd say that's my total on a year-to-year basis. Ben asks, what would we have to give up in a trade for Pete Fairbanks or Carlos Estevez? I think more than you would be comfortable with. It's going to take a little bit of a hit. I think it would take a top 5 prospect in your system. So you're looking at a Ben Kudrna, Carter Jensen, a Blake Mitchell, and then maybe somebody in the 9 to 10 range, a Peyton Wilson, a Hunter Owen, Javier Vaz, maybe. But maybe some guys with higher upside than that. And Tampa Bay knows exactly who they're looking for. I don't see them as being a trade partner you really want to go after. But the Angels, a little bit different of a story. You might be able to get Carlos Estevez for a little bit less because he is just a rental at the end of the day. This one comes from Jackson. Kopech and Pham, what's your package? If it was for Kopech and Pham, I would try to get away with both those guys. I mean, Pham's a rental. Just to double check here, I think Michael Kopech is a rental. And if both those guys are rentals, it's not going to be as steep as you would think it would be. So as I'm doing this on the fly, Michael Kopech is a free agent. Oh, he do have him for an extra year of control. So you might be able to get away with just one guy in the top 5 and then maybe a lottery ticket throw in and then one more guy in your top 30. Speaking of names, oh, shoot. I mean, maybe you could do like Steven Zobak, a Ben Kudrna or Carter Jensen. That would suck too to trade him in division, though. So I think you try to get away from that and go with Peyton Wilson, maybe Steven Zobak, and then a lottery ticket thrown like a Ramon Ramirez. That maybe would be my package to go get Pham and Michael Kopech. This one comes from Royal Man 5. When will Jazz Chisholm arrive in Kansas City? I think they're going to be going after him like Pittsburgh is. And the fact that Seattle went out there and got Randy Arozarena, I'm not saying it takes him completely out of the running, but, you know, Julio Rodriguez, I don't think will be out too terribly long. So they're not going to acquire 2 outfielders with Julio coming back. I think they'll kind of treat Julio as another addition when he comes off of the injured list. But they're going to be in the running. I can't tell you he's arriving in Kansas City anytime soon, but I think the Royals were very interested, at least as of a few weeks ago. And lastly, John asked, is Bubic a closer option as well? Again, we kind of touched on this a little bit. I think he'll get an opportunity at least once or twice this year, depending on matchups, but I just don't know if he's going to be the first guy thrust into that role. So I do think he's got closer stuff, maybe better than James MacArthur's. I just don't know where the Royals' heads are on that. I would love to ask it next time I get down in the locker room in the clubhouse to ask Matt Cottrell that, because I do think Chris Bubich has the stuff to be a closer, even for this team in the middle of a wild card race. Okay, that's going to do it for another Mailbag Friday. Thank you to all the questions that came in to this mailbag. If I didn't get to your question, just shoot them over to me again, and I'll answer them directly to you. But as for us, that'll wrap up another week of Locked On Royals. And before we say goodbye, one last shout out to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channel's app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'll enjoy the 3-game series against the Chicago Cubs. If any trades happen, we'll be breaking all that down on Monday, but we will be breaking down this series against the Cubbies. But until then, you take it easy, Kansas City.